Another Monday, the 10th of February. And he's Joe Rao over there.
Yes, here I am. And
Yeah.
over, am I pointing in the right
No,
direction?
the other direction.
Oh, that way.
Right.
Yeah, and over there is, who are you again?
What?
I woke up this morning, looked out the window. It was a dreary, cloudy, rainy morning, and of course it was a
Yep.
Monday. And I said, Karen Carpenter was right. Rainy days and Mondays always bring you down, and that's pretty.
Downright ugly today.
Yes,
And actually, when you think about it, at least here, it's likely, we get a short dry spurt late tomorrow afternoon into Wednesday, and then it starts up all over again Wednesday night and Thursday. Probably have to wait till Friday to have a whole day and of some sunshine, and by then, and then it's going to be cold for a couple of days.
right. For a couple of days.
A couple of days.
Yeah.
And if you're tuning into this show tonight thinking that I'm going to have, or Joe and I are going to have wonderful news for snow lovers, that the pattern is changing and we're going to have some sort of late run for winter weather lovers, guess again. It ain't happening.
It's not going to happen.
No, this Joe, it's unrelenting. I can't remember. I guess you go back to the winter of 13-14, and to a maybe slightly lesser extent 14-15, where you get into these really long periods where the pattern just locks in for a good solid 8 weeks, or even longer in the case of 13-14, and that's kind of what we've got here. I mean, the polar vortex is up near the North Pole, where it doesn't really, most of the time it's actually not there, but this year it is, and it's tightly wound like a very very tight ball, and cold air just can't break away and move southward. You get these little breakaways that come down, like we'll get at the end of the week, but that's it. There's no sign of that polar vortex breaking down, at least through the next 2 weeks.
And you said it all right there. I haven't even bothered to do any kind of short fused updates because I said to myself, well, I've already posted the forecast on Facebook. What more can I add to this? If you want some really exciting weather, although maybe in a way there are some people who are excited about the fact that it is going to turn uh, considerably colder here by the end of this week. In fact, I think Joe on Friday night, Saturday morning, many places up here in the lower Hudson Valley will probably be in the single digits. So
Yeah,
cold.
definitely cold shot for sure. And of course, if you're a snow lover and you're in Western New York, if you're in Northern New York, if you're in Northern New England, this next system for Wednesday night and Thursday. It'll be snowing up there, which isn't exactly breaking news. So that's it. And actually, one of the more important aspects about this whole pattern, because of how wet it has been, they are bone soaked in Virginia and in parts of the Mid-Atlantic states from all these rain events that they've had. And I talked to Johnny Quest a little earlier, and you know he's gotten something like 10 or 15 inches of rain so far since the beginning of the year up in the mountains of northwestern Virginia, and that's a problem if too much rain. And of course, we've got flood watches all over the place across the South. We have looks like we might have a severe weather threat for the central Gulf Coast on Wednesday as this next storm system comes out. And they have winter storm warnings up in New Mexico and in Northwest Texas. And anytime you have winter storm warnings in New Mexico and Northwest Texas, it's not good for the East, because that tells you that the trough is in the western part of the United States.
Yes. I'm just trying to bring up a map or two here while you're talking. I'm trying to do three different things at once.
Well, you
Yeah.
bring up the map. I'm going to bring up one of my own. So let me get this started here. Hi to everybody on the chat board tonight. Uh, by the way, Christina Pedia asked me about whether uh, I'd ever go to a subscription uh, platform on YouTube, and the answer to that is no. I like the idea of doing these YouTube videos to open to everyone, and there's no plans at all to do that. You got to get 30,000 subscribers, I think, to get to even qualify for it, or maybe they even made the number higher. I've got no interest in doing that. Joe and I want to uh, keep things free and open to everybody. I got my Patreon subscription platform, so that's more than enough for anybody who's interested. It's patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Cioffi, and it's just a whopping $2 a month, unless you got unless you need a lot of weather help. All right, so I'm going to bring up Joe the watches and the warnings that are flying at the moment.
My goodness, $2 a month. That's six in the month of February. That's 6.8 cents a day.
That is, yes. And in the month of 30-day months, it's what, 6.5 cents a day?
Something like that.
Something like that. And in 31-day months, it's 6.2 cents a day. Okay, so, oh, why are you up there on a full screen? We don't want that. Hang on.
Hi.
um, there
Six
we go.
on a 31 day.
So tonight, as we said, we've got flood watches up from northeast Texas across northern Louisiana, southeastern Arkansas, cutting east-northeast from there through central and northern Mississippi, central and northern Alabama, in northern Georgia, where some spots got up to 8 inches of snow on Saturday in the mountains in northern Georgia and the Smokies. And flood watches are up also for much of Tennessee, at least the eastern part of it, and western South and western North Carolina. Winter storm watches up for parts of West Texas, Northwest Texas. Winter weather advisories further north. For New Mexico, virtually the whole state is under a winter storm warning, and we've got some winter storm warnings up in southern Colorado with advisories maybe up to Denver. Let's see, does Denver have a winter weather advisory up? Indeed, they do. Winter weather advisory 23 there right now, Joe, and snowing. And I'm seeing snow there on the radar. And every weather service has their winter weather page under a different place, and I can't seem to find where Denver has their winter weather page. Oh well, we'll figure it out somehow. But the bottom line is that the action here, again, when you got stuff going on in New Mexico like this, the trough is in the west, wind advisories in central and southern California, and winter storm watches in eastern North Dakota and western Minnesota. And that's it. That's what it looks like across the nation.
That's the whole thing.
It is, and as we mentioned, SPC. Actually, I'll just back it up because there is a marginal risk of severe weather going on right now. And hang on, this is day. Okay, this is which outlook is this now? This is for. Oh, this is for tonight into tomorrow morning. So they actually do have a marginal risk in an east northeast, west southwest oriented band from East Texas across northern Louisiana into Mississippi, and a slight risk indicated in there. And then for tomorrow, Tuesday, we are seeing a marginal risk in the Carolinas, away from the coast, but even in eastern North Carolina, we got a marginal risk and a marginal risk in parts of North Georgia. And then on their day 3, which is for Wednesday, we have an enhanced risk already for northeastern Louisiana, across Mississippi into western Alabama. Slight risk covers the rest of the state of Louisiana except the northwest, into the rest of Mississippi except the northwest, much of Alabama except the southeast, the extreme western part of the Florida Panhandle, a portion of central Tennessee, and a little nose into south central Kentucky on the slight risk. And the marginal risk kind of covers that. You guys can see it on the map on either side. Hey, severe weather season, Joseph, is going to be here soon enough.
Yeah, isn't it sad though, Joe? Here we are. It's the 10th day of February, and we're talking more about convective outlooks and severe weather as opposed to snow or possible snow in this part of the country. And the next wave or the next possible snow threat for the immediate tri-state area looks like Thursday, but it doesn't even look like a threat because it looks like if there's going to be any snow of any consequence, it'd probably be well to our north. Maybe, let's say, the state capital, Albany in New York here, might get a couple of 3 inches with that system later on in the week. But here it looks like, again, once again, mainly a rainy type of weather scenario.
Wave train is what we got. If you look on the satellite loop tonight, it's just this endless stream of moisture that's coming from off of Baja California northeastward into Texas, and then it goes northeast from there. But there are three distinct weather systems that are moving through. The first one coming through the northeast right now, and then the second one that's going to come in later tonight and for tomorrow, and then we've got the third one that's coming in for Wednesday night and Thursday. And the third one, by the way, Joe, is another one of these systems where some of the weather models were trying to time out some cold air for Wednesday, which turned out to be virtually non-existent, at least for here and point south. Maybe enough of it up. There's going to be enough of it up well upstate in New York and in northern New England, clearly. But this was another example of how biases in the models sometimes cause them to be colder than what the atmosphere is saying. And when you've got the primary pattern telling you uh, uh, one thing, and you're trying to fight against it, you better have something monumental in order to support your contention that it's going to be different this time, because the trend is your friend, or in this case, the trend is your enemy.
That's a funny thing. Last night, I forget what the video was or who put it together. It sounded like a very young person, actually, who created a video that lasted about 20 minutes, and he was arguing or talking about the possibility of a major northeast snowstorm later on this week, Wednesday night and Thursday.
This week? Oh,
Yeah,
stop.
yeah,
Stop.
yeah. Well, I said to my wife, I said, how old does he sound? I can't actually physically see what he looks like, but it sounded like somebody in his like late teens or early 20s and talking about, well, there's a discrepancy among the models and
There's
the
no
watches.
discrepancy. What discrepancy?
Uh, you know, Joe, I say to people, I said, social media, not social media, but the internet and technology today has been a boon, and it also has been, in many cases, I mean, like people post things, you don't know how old they are or how long they've been in the business,
Nobody checks
and
dates, by the way.
yeah, yeah, and you could say like a 12-year-old, making a comment about a potential major storm down the road or whatever, and he'll probably get like hundreds or even maybe a few thousand people surging to his site and believing him. But I don't know. Anyway,
Well, we don't
I
do
agree
we
with
don't
you. I see
we
nothing.
don't we don't do that.
I see nothing in the foreseeable. We may just go through this whole month. This is amazing for me up here in Putnam Valley to say that I have not even gotten into double digits yet in terms of snow accumulation, and it's the 10th day of February. I mean, that's utterly amazing. I
Yeah,
mean, it's crazy.
but
I actually did have a coating on my deck late last night into early this morning, but then when I woke up later in the morning, the rain had just about washed all of it away. So,
you can't keep it on there long enough to take a good picture of it.
yeah, exactly.
Well, the radar's loaded for those of you who are into rain because there's quite a bit of it. Now, the rain over us, the northern edge is actually kind of dropping southeastward for now, but there's another bulge of rain back through Maryland and Virginia, and then that extends southward. Looks like some heavy rains across northern Georgia back through northern Mississippi. I'm sorry, northern Alabama into Mississippi. A few thunderstorms are embedded in the mix there. And you've also got some heavy rains coming out of northeast Texas, moving into Arkansas and Oklahoma. Very busy here on the radar. Might be a little bit of snow there on the radar in North Texas. And you're starting to get the moisture to come into Arizona and particularly into New Mexico, where it's going to be running into colder air. And you saw on that the full U.S. loop, the upper low that's sitting in Southern California, over Baja California. And if you watch the rotation on the radar, you can see the spinning here, the counterclockwise turn of that upper low. You have this busy southern stream, Joe, and if you had some kind of northern jet that was down far enough to bring some cold air masses down, you certainly could have a much more robust production of snow to look ahead to. But you don't have it. That's the part that's missing here. The southern part of the jet is doing its job and shooting all this moisture on a regular basis, but the Arctic air is all locked up in northern Canada and it ain't coming down.
So what you're alluding to here is that we're going to continue to have a very highly negative PNA and a very highly positive NAO for the duration.
Yeah, well, and also now the EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation, and it just goes to show you how you can't even rely on the snapshots of the GFS anyway. But the GFS had the last week, early last week, we were talking about the EPO going negative for a couple of weeks, and strongly so, which would have made a difference. That would have at least opened the door to some colder air masses coming down out of Canada. But on the latest over the last couple of days, the EPO is now forecast to be strongly positive, and that's usually warm in the east when the EPO is strongly positive, relatively speaking. And by the way, speaking of the wet pattern and rain, if you look at WPC's rainfall 7-day forecast in the areas across the Gulf states and into the Western Carolinas, there's a broad area of 3 to 5 inch plus rain. So we're talking about a good soaking. Some of that is overrunning, some of that is convective. But the wet weather continues across the Gulf states, and some of that actually extends up to us. We're kind of in the range of about 1.5 inches to the 2 inch line runs down across southern New Jersey. Otherwise, the Northwest, of course, gets clobbered, which they usually do with the trough in the West. You would expect that. And the Southwest gets a fair amount of precip, up to about 1.5 inches of liquid. And in New Mexico, of course, we're talking about snow. So some of that, I don't know how much of that is back end loaded. I didn't give it a good solid look. But as far as snow goes, Joe, with Wednesday night and Thursday, the digital forecast map from the Weather Service goes out to Thursday evening. So this might cover most, but not all, of what's going to fall in upstate New York and New England. And it looks generally, you go up toward I-90 and points north and west of there. It looks like a 3 to 4, 3 to 5 inch snowfall, maybe some isolated higher amounts here and there, some 6 inch amounts in southwest New York, some 6 inch plus amounts east of Lake Ontario, so you get a little lake effect there. But the southern end goes to about Route 80 in Pennsylvania for a coating to 1 inch or 2. The southern end also comes down to about Route 84 for a coating to 1 inch. So that might argue for a little bit of snow at the start, maybe late Wednesday and Wednesday evening. And then that's it. Then it just goes to rain.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I mean we're really I mean, we had a little bit of snow up here last night. Of course, I just mentioned that for maybe a few hours, but didn't really amount to all that much, and it just got washed away. So it looks like we could have a repeat event of that Wednesday night into Thursday. And in fact, if you're like me and you sleep, beyond the sun up,
Right.
like 8, 9 in the morning, you might wake up and look out the window and you not even know it snowed at all. So
Uh,
it's
yeah. I'd like to see a snowflake. Everyone, it would be nice. Can't remember the last time I saw one.
in fact,
Uh,
I'm gonna have to probably start my snowblower up again at the end of the week, just to just for the sake of starting it up.
I'm sure the snowblower would like that
I've
because
only
it's
used it twice so far this year. This just boggles my mind. I could remember now. I've been up here in Putnam Valley. This is my 17th or 18th winter, and I could believe me. I can tell you we've had winters up here where by this time in the winter season I've already used the snowblower like 15 times.
oh
But
yeah, I mean the same for Long
spring,
Island, and I've had my share of really big ones down here in the last 20 years. Again, but this is last year and this year. I don't think I hardly used it last year. I don't even remember if I used it at all last year.
yeah.
And this year, yeah, obviously not. 1 to 4, 1 to 3, 1 to 4 inch snows across the Great Lakes, the northern parts of the Ohio Valley. This will probably come with the system for Wednesday night. The northern fringe of that producing a little bit of snow. Also, looks like a coating to 1 inch or so across the northern plains. We're looking at some 1 to 6 inch amounts from New Mexico up into that winter weather advisory area into Colorado. Looks like they're printing 4 for Denver here, so I'm sure Ruthless Goat is waiting for his next round of snow. And for a change, we don't have triple digits up in the Northwest, only prints of 11 and 16 in the mountains to the east of of Seattle and Tacoma. So a bit of a break in the snow, even up that way.
So winter trends across the United States so far have shown three major but short-lived nationwide cold snaps. The third one is about to show up just in time for Valentine's Day, so I guess that truly will be a hug your honey day and a hug your honey night. But we had the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend. That was the coldest, the number one coldest period of winter so far. Number two is the week just before Christmas. Number three will be Valentine's Day. Now, the Valentine's Day period, Friday, Saturday, looks to be roughly 5 degrees colder than last year and the seventh coldest of the past 35 years nationally. And if you're, into winter sales, every 1 degree colder brings a 3% bounce in winter apparel and boot sales, 7% bounce in coat sales, 8% in fire log sales, 24% bounce in electric bedding sales. And if you do the math, big sales gains for winter clearance sales plus 15%, winter apparel, 35% coat sales, 40% fire log sales, 120% plus for electric bedding sales. The trends don't look, overly favorable for the balance of the winter. So this really is the last really good clearance opportunity. These statistics, by the way, courtesy of our friends over at weathertrends360.com.
You ought to send a cut of this to CNBC.
Yeah, they probably could use it. Snowfall, by the way, has been non-existent, as you are well aware, along the northeast coast from Washington D.C. through Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. But interestingly, well inland, New England has actually had a very snowy winter with above average snowfall. But most of the big cities have missed out on the snow this season, and it does not look like there's too much hope lingering on the horizon in the days to come.
All right, so let's run through the GFS just for laughs, and we are, of course, in the east. You can see the systems kind of how they outline here on the map. Whoops, let me just erase this. So you've got your first system that's going out, your second mess that is moving right behind it, and then you've got the one in the southwest that is going to be for uh, for Wednesday night, Thursday. And of course, if you look across southern Canada, all right, you actually have lower pressures as you go north. Okay, that's not what you want to see. You want to see higher pressures as you go north here, because that's telling you that there's cold air. But instead, you've got this sort of west to east flow across southern Canada, and it does you no good because it doesn't bring any kind of cold air. You want to get that cold air to kind of wedge up in the Northeast and into southeastern Canada, but not to be the case. And here's that second surge of rain that comes in during the early morning hours into the mid Atlantic states and then eventually starts to pull away. This is supposed to be what the radar looks like, Joe. It looks like it'll be raining at least into mid afternoon for you and me. Then we get the improvement, and now you start to see the precip breaking out across New Mexico and Texas tomorrow night. And that starts to run with a low that goes west of the Appalachians again. There's your snow. This is Wednesday evening on the northern fringe in northern Missouri, the northern half of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, and into northwest PA. Then that gradually translates into upstate New York. But look where this low goes. I mean, it goes from Nashville to southern Ohio to northeast Pennsylvania, like near Williamsport, 998 low. And that means that's almost looks like a warm front might try to come through here Wednesday night into Thursday morning. And then it goes into the Gulf of Maine. And now here comes your cold high. A lot good. A lot good it does you here as it comes in on the backside. And this is all cold air that's going to be drawn southward for Thursday. And it's dry all the way back to the Rockies at this point. But I guess it's going to be a shock to most folks because we haven't had that many days with temperatures in the teens and single digits by the time we get to Saturday morning. That's what it'll be.
Right, and by Saturday, and by Saturday morning, Joe, after that, very cold start, already the process will begin for warming things up. The pressures will be rising, and a ridge of high pressure will be building along the eastern seaboard. So, as much as Saturday is going to be cold, Sunday will be noticeably milder, and then for early next week, at least through the middle part of the of next week, that big ridge just covers much of well, the center of that high pressure ridge is down over South Florida, but it kind of ridges or builds northward right along the eastern seaboard and stays with us right on again until the middle part of next week. And all the cold air, what little there is back west over the Rockies and the Continental Divide. So it will get cold, but it's not going to stay cold for much longer than 48 hours, and then we warm right back up again second half of the weekend into
Right.
the next week.
And a big power, bit of a storm comes into the northwest over the weekend and brings snows inland and heavy rain along the coast. There's a bit of a warm front early Sunday morning crossing the eastern lakes, and there's a few snow showers ahead of that in upstate New York. But then we just kind of gradually transition over to milder air. I think we'll probably get into the 50s here on Monday, the way it looks to me.
Right now, I have for the lower Hudson Valley, on average, I have an average high of 49 for next Monday and a nighttime low Monday night of around 31 or 32.
Hmm.
I'm questioning whether or not we're going to see precipitation. The European keeps us dry next Monday, although the initial thought was that there might be some kind of system coming through and bringing us some precip at the start of next week.
That
So,
looks like it'll happen on Tuesday.
yeah.
In fact, if you look at Tuesday, it kind of looks like what we're going through now. You've got a low in upstate New York that runs east and a trailing, slow moving front, and there's probably going to be another wave that hangs back into Texas. There is a bit more in the way of colder air here on the GFS, but I'll tell you something. We saw that with the models for the system for Wednesday night and Thursday, at least initially days ago, and that wound up being wrong.
Right.
So, if that's the case, if you look at this for early next week, it kind of looks like what we're going through now with the front stalling, a couple of waves moving along, then sinking southward. And then the model does this thing where it wants to make some kind of low off the southeast coast and starts to wrap it up into a major gale center east of Virginia and south of Cape Cod. It's got a 985 low at 37.5 and 69.2 with some snow back to the coast and even has snow in West Virginia, Virginia, Delaware, southern New Jersey, the darker blue snow.
You're talking about what, February 21st?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I got a couple of messages or pings, as I call them, on Facebook Messenger. People saying, "What do you think?" And that's important to them because that's the start of the big President's Day weekend. And so somebody actually said to me, said,
Wait,
"Hey
when is
Joe,
President's Day? I thought President's Day was Monday.
next Monday?"
Isn't it, or it's the following Monday?
I think it's the following Monday.
President's Day is going to be on the 24th.
No, I'm talking. No, this coming weekend is
Yeah,
Valentine's Day weekend, and then the beginning of the President's Day weekend would be the 21st, Friday. Uh,
Monday's President's Day. No, wait, Friday. Hold on.
Friday's the
President's Day.
21st. Friday's the 21st of February, and President's Day this year would be the 24th. Yeah, you're right. But the beginning of the President's Day weekend would be that Friday, wouldn't
No,
it?
no, no. President's Day is Monday, February 17th.
February 17th.
Mm-hmm.
You mean this weekend? This upcoming weekend
Yeah,
is
yeah. This up
really,
this upcoming weekend is for President's
really,
Day. Yes.
really. Oh, well, then that person who sent me, if you're watching right now, this person was like screaming about a big snowstorm for President's the start of President's Day weekend on February the 21st. If you're watching, thank you for
Well, I
making
just Googled it. It said February. What day? Well, I'll
all right.
Google it again.
Joe, I'm just reading a message.
No, 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 no. I understand.
I got two
This
messages
is
from
a
two.
huge controversy.
I got two messages from two people saying, "What about February 21st, the big storm, the snowstorm? What about that? What about that?" And one of the two people said, "That's the beginning of the President's
Oh yeah.
Day."
Well, he's wrong. I got it up there for you.
All right.
Uh, Going back to this. Okay. Going back to this. I
By
just
the way, I
want to.
don't believe it. I don't believe that February 21st is going to amount to a hill of beans anyway.
Well, I'll tell you why. I agree with you, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so if I'm going to bring up the GFS upper air, okay, going into next week, and actually you have pretty much the sick looking pattern that you have now. what the GFS is doing is that it's got this trough that drops down into eastern Canada with some cold air, and the west southwest part of the trough that goes into Texas. There's an upper low that forms in Illinois, Indiana, cuts off, and then just kind of, spirals eastward off the New Jersey coast. Okay.
Right. Right.
Now, here's why I think this is wrong. Because if you look at the European, if you take the logical way that the European is going to play this out beyond 240, if you want to match it to what the GFS, the trough is off the East Coast and already gone. The ridge is building. The upper high in the Northwest Caribbean and over to the Florida Keys is already building all the way up through the Great Lakes. And that trough in the southern part of the jet stream is down in New Mexico. And if you could move this along, and if you move this along, this may wind up being another instance where the GFS is trying to time out the northern and southern stream, where you're going to wind up with some colder air, and for a brief time where you would have a pretty good looking surface for the I-95 corridor. I think it's wrong. I think that it's going to wind up like the system here for Wednesday night and Thursday.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're going to wind up taking a low up the Ohio Valley and to our west if that low is real. So
Yeah.
I agree with you. This is, to me, in a winter where you can't get anything substantial to go out, even once or twice, to have something go out underneath you with a little bit of cold air. You have nothing to look back at and say, hey, this happened 2 weeks ago, this happened a month ago. No, you're fighting against the primary trend. And the other thing, Joe, is if you look up, I'm now into hour 252. Okay, so this is next Friday. Again, what's the flow across northern Canada? Where's the polar vortices? Where are they sitting? Pretty much in the Arctic, north of northwest Canada, in the Arctic Ocean. All your Arctic air is up there. I mean, this is really just more of the same silliness. You know what
I,
I want.
I know what you were going to say,
You know what
Joe.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
And of course, we still have this mega fire hose in the Atlantic, although it's not quite to the extreme of what we saw this week. And actually, the extreme part of the fire hose, it strengthens again at the end of the week. My God, you look at the flow. We got to take a look at this jet again up in the Atlantic. Let me bring up the 200 millibar. This is
I feel kind of proud actually because we were the first ones, I think, to my knowledge, that began discussing this like the middle or latter part of last week, and now it's all over the news media
oh, of
about
course.
these these aircraft, setting records going across the.
We're trendsetters, Rayo. We're not trend followers. Oh my God! I mean, I'm looking here, Joe. There's a streak. There's a streak of 200 knot plus winds, starting from Cape May and going all the way out to the Azores, and eventually making its way all across the Atlantic, over into northwestern Europe. What are you going to do with that? You can't
You
do
can't
anything with that.
you
It's
can't do.
horrid. It's just horrible. This
Yeah.
is like this here. Here's the good news out of it. If you're a snow lover, okay, if you're a snow lover, just remember this: if you're a snow lover in the I-95 urban corridor, and the reason why, by the way, we spend time on this is because that's where we are. I mean, we're based in that area, so. And most of our audience, of course, if you're watching from somewhere else around the country, why do you always talk about the I-95 corridor? Well, because that's kind of where we are. Although we're more than happy to talk about other places, which we do. But take a look at this and just think about the fact that it could not possibly get any worse than this. So
Yeah.
there's nothing but upside from here, okay? You've had two back-to-back winters of widespread below average snowfall, which we haven't seen since 2006, 2007, and 2007, 2008. So just kind of try to hold on to that as maybe hope for next year. And I say that, and you know me, okay? You know me, Joe. I would not, if there was any chance that this was going to break down, I would have no problem saying so. But when I keep looking at this day after day after day, and you look at this what's going on from Canada northward into the Arctic. You get these little shots that come down, but I mean it just doesn't. Again, once again, here's another example, Joe. At 384 hours, the upper air actually looks a little bit better. Okay, but it's always there.
That
It's
it's
always there. It never happens.
right, right. It never, you go way out to, let's say, 360 hours or 384 as yeah, then it starts getting better. Except the only problem is that as you approach that particular time frame, everything starts to fall apart or wither away, and it keeps promising you it'll get better in about 15 days. It's terrible.
We
It really
have,
is.
I got the stratosphere up, which right now, believe it or not, the polar vortex is actually split in two, okay, with one center over Greenland and the other one back on the coast of Siberia. But watch what happens starting tomorrow and beyond. The Greenland low pretty much takes over, strengthens, and then after just kind of spinning around a little bit over the Arctic and tightening up and actually deepening, it migrates back towards Siberia, for God's sake. It's back to where we started
It's
this whole thing.
it's
And
kind of like that episode of I Love Lucy where Lucy is driving, everybody's asleep, and she ends up taking a path all the way around
yes,
back to that place
right,
just
we're
across.
not back in the same place. And her response is, well, we are, unless there's a chain of these across across the country. So here's
Uh,
the thing, though, about the way this the what's going on in the atmosphere. So the long range on day 16. I hate to sound overly hopeless for everybody. The long range on day 16 takes you to February 26th. There is no sign of that weather of this pattern breaking down meaningfully in the next 16 days. So let's assume that starting on February 27th, the process gets underway to break the pattern down. So you would think that it would probably take at least 10 days to 2 weeks, okay, for that to happen. And if that's the case, then now you're in almost to the middle of March.
hmm
And now you're at a point where, you better have a perfect setup in order to bring snow down near the coast, or at least maybe not a perfect setup, but you're going to need a much more than what you would normally need at this time of year. The clock is running out. If we were seeing the beginnings of a pattern change now, then we could think back to what happened a couple of years ago when we had those four nor'easters in March. Not saying that would have been the necessary outcome the second time around, but we could look at it and say, okay, so this is happening now. So by the time we get to the end of February, that'll give us a 2 to 3 week window where we could maybe see something happening. I just don't see it. You're carried to the end of the month and everything still looks pretty much the same. You're gonna run into you're gonna run into the beginning of spring by the time we get there.
right. Yeah, you're right. The clock is for those people who I remember once Tex Antoine, the late Tex Antoine, in advance of a potential snowstorm, he showed, the development of a storm maybe along the coast, cold air trying to build in over the Northeast. And he took one look at the camera and he said, in other words, Ms. Nature just might be. And we're keeping our eye on the rabbit.
Well, you and I are now back full screen, and Trevor McKelvey says, I think the polar vortex staying in the Arctic is giving the South a very favorable pattern for rain. And you are absolutely correct, except for that one little window in North Georgia on Saturday morning that produced 6 to 8 inch amounts north and northeast of Atlanta. And I see William Uber is on tonight, and we've got Scott Briller, the chairman, is on. Did Scott leave me a Jeopardy question for you? Let me bring it up. I'll try to bring it up in the meantime. Hang on.
Shelly Man Studios, this winter doo doo.
Oh, yes, it is, isn't it? But like I said, folks, you could just look at it. The best way to look at it is to look at it along the lines of that it can't possibly get any worse, unless, of course, we go for three in a row. Uh,
Oh, may I also say a shout out to Vanessa Murdoch, who is on CBS Channel 2 on weekends, and who on Saturday evening used my statistic about the snow window, so to speak, from February 3rd to February 17th, where I pointed out that more than one third of all of the double-digit snowfalls that have occurred at Central Park have occurred in that 2 week window, and she actually showed that on the air and talked about it.
but did
So,
she give you credit for it?
well, but I know where it
Did
came from.
she see at least say that a certain person up in Putnam Valley provided this for us?
No,
No,
she didn't.
she did not.
I was still honored for her to use that
Well, I
information.
don't know that she watches this show. I do know that Lonnie watches the show.
Yeah, well,
So, Lonnie, you might want to give her just a little bit of a nudge.
no, I'm not saying anything in the negative. I just felt very, very happy that somebody was using that bringing that statistic out to all of the masses in the tri-state metropolitan area. So thank you very much, Vanessa Murdoch.
Okay. By the way, I heard from Terrence Cardinal Fitzgerald today.
Terrence Cardinal Fitzgerald, who now is the weather producer, the behind the scenes weather producer at NBC Network on weekends,
Yes, good for him.
working
Awesome.
working for working for Jose Bilar on Saturday and Kate Snow on Sunday.
Kate Snow, is that her last name?
Kate Snow, yeah, that's a
Oh, well.
great name for February, isn't it?
It is when it's happening.
Yeah.
Uh,
And what did the good Cardinal have to say to you?
oh no, he's good. Everything is fine. Oh, that's right. I wanted to mention this, by the way. Timothy Veltman gave me a link, and I'm very, um, you know me, Joe. I'm a generous soul, so I have no problems promoting other people, whether they are a competition or not. Um, and he pointed out today there's a podcast for those of you who are interested. It's called Stormfront Freaks Podcast, and it tapes live on YouTube Thursday, February 20th, with Tom Nizzol, who apparently worked for the. I don't know because I don't watch. So you'll just have to forgive me, Tom, if you're here about this.
Izzo
But
or Nizzo?
Nizol.
Okay.
He works for the Weather Channel and so on. And Timothy says he's pretty good with weather analysis. Not quite as good as we are, but that's fine. Uh, but I do have a link to that YouTube channel for those of you who might be interested in that weather podcast. So I am putting it up there for your enjoyment and your convenience. Fled Weather, I know you're looking for a blizzard. You better keep looking because it ain't going to happen. Okay, not in the I-95 corridor anytime soon. Fierce Weather is hoping to see some healthy storms this Wednesday in Mississippi, where we do have that enhanced risk of severe weather. So yeah, with that low coming out the way it is, wouldn't be a surprise. And of course, now pretty soon we're going to be getting into March, and the severe weather should really start to rev up. Timothy says that Tom was the winter weather expert for the Weather Channel. He got his roots in Buffalo, so that's a good place to get your snow roots, to get them to grow if you spend time in Buffalo. Just to take your lawn chair out and face it with a west southwest wind into a west southwest wind, and just count the flakes as they're coming down. Uh,
Scott Briller asked where Brittany Bora is doing, and interestingly, she is also at NBC News as well. I think she's at NBC in the mornings, and then as she's leaving, that's when this is on weekends now. That's when she's leaving. That's when Brian comes strolling in the afternoon and evening. So our former colleagues down at 30 Rockefeller Plaza.
Mark G has thrown in the towel. He says we all need to face it. Spring will be here shortly. Baseball is coming. Summer soon after. It's done. Over. Hope for next year. You know what? As I said, if there was any sign of a pattern change, I would hold on for those few weeks in March. There's nothing on the table. And I really would not bank on the GFS being correct this time around since in its long range for next week, because it's been doing that for for the last 3 months pretty much, and not a single one of those systems has come to fruition. Why is the southeast ridge so hard to get lost? Vito Spano asks. Well, I think what you should probably ask, maybe instead of this, the southeast ridge is the southeast ridge pops up because of the deep trough that's out in the west. And the deep trough that's out in the west is there because of the fact that you've got the polar vortex way up in north from northwest Canada on up into the Arctic. So if you could get that to get out of the way and get rid of that trough in the west, you would get rid of the southeast ridge. But until you do, so it's not just that the southeast ridge independently pops up; it's popping up as a result of everything else that's going on. It's all connected here. So um, I would look more for that pattern to break down. Try to get that pattern to break down in the western part of the United States, and that southeast ridge would flatten out. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen at all. Ruthless Goat says, let's be realistic. This winter is a big bust for the big population centers in the east and Midwest. The southeast is warm and wet as usual, just like I'm not going to say that part. And the lamentations of snow lovers. You are correct, except for that one little phrase you got in there. Uh, um, Paul Roman passed the fat lady on the way home as she's getting ready to sing her aria on the stage. She's gotten her cue. So, she has already sung here, okay, as you may well know. John Curtis, Earth has been extra cloudy all winter. This means the sun's energy was reflected back out into space. Could this make for a cooler summer? I don't know. That could easily be undone, and undone rather quickly.
I'm just looking, Joe, at the ensemble, the European ensemble for that infamous 21st day of February next week, and believe it or not, uh, the European ensemble actually looks like it has some kind of a ridge of high pressure dominating in the eastern United States, at least for Thursday night, February 20th, and it's like just beginning to break down on the 21st. I see no sign of any kind of closed low or any kind of possible, storm formation. And even if it did, the European is suggesting that it may actually be a bit on the mild side for that. I mean, watch. We end up with some kind of a disturbance, but it turns out to be, as all the other cases have been, mostly or mainly rain.
Adam Lowe says models have zonal westerlies at record levels for the next 3 weeks. You are correct. That is correct, sir. And that means all the cold air stays bottled up to the north. And yeah, I mean, that really just kind of sums it up here. So, one thing I did notice, by the way, Joe, is a lot of the. Let me see if I can bring it up. Hang on one second here. Um, Pacific. I noticed this last week when I did my talk at the Sachem Library, and now it's kind of above my pay grade here, so you kind of want to take whatever I'm saying with a grain of salt.
Fled,
But
fled weather says, I am praying to God that he gives a blizzard on the 21st in the I-95 corridor. Keep on praying, Fled.
yeah, one of the things I'm noticing, Joe, and of course, water temperatures can always kind of tricky. They can be undone. Along the equator, we've got pockets of cooler than normal ocean water temperatures, and then up around 20 north between Hawaii and Southern California, and then up the California coast. And this is probably because of all the storminess that's been out in the west to a large extent. Also showing a below average ocean water temperatures there. I want to get the full hemisphere view though. Hold on. Full global. There we go. Okay, so this is interesting. Let me bring this up full screen. This is where you got to when you get these winter forecasts, and you look at certain things and you say, all right, one of the things a lot that gets pointed out a lot is Well, the ocean water in the Gulf of Alaska is pretty warm, so that would favor a negative East Pacific oscillation and a positive PNA, Pacific North America pattern. Take a look at the ocean water temperature anomalies that are across the northern part of the Gulf of Alaska and then up and down the west coast of North America. They're all below normal, okay? So what was maybe above normal going into the fall has now turned all below normal in that part of the Pacific. And you see below normal south of the equator, down off the coast of South America, and you get these patches that are along the equator. I wonder if this means that there's going to be, is there going to be maybe a La Nina that develops?
I think
Uh,
that's what they're alluding to, Joe. I think if for nothing else in this La Nada or nothing pattern now, that if we see any change, it's going to be tilting more toward La Nina as opposed to an El Nino. People have been asking, he says, will we be seeing an El Nino soon or an El Nino later on in the summer? I think it's going to be a more of a La Nina pattern that we're going to be heading for this go around once we break out of this nothing pattern. Yeah, you look at all that cold water that's out over the South Pacific there, off of the South American coastline. And what happened to the blob? Remember a couple of winters ago we had this big blob of warm water. I think what near the Aleutians or south of Alaska,
right.
and there's nothing like that this year.
By the way, if you look, I brought up the Arctic sea ice, and this is the area of ocean that has at least 15% of sea ice. The blue line is the current state of the sea ice. The dashed line that's up on the screen, that is the record low year for sea ice, which was 2011, 2012, which, if you remember, that corresponded with the Super El Nino, with, I think that was that an El Nino or a La Nina year? 11 and 12 was, it was extreme, whichever one it was. I think it
Yeah,
was an El Nino year. But the sea ice, this is a consequence of that polar vortex being locked up and all the cold air being locked up in the Arctic region, that we are seeing sea ice actually growing. It's above that low. It's inside the range of the last 30 years. Now the mean is up a little bit. It's up above it, so it's still below the mean, but it's kind of inside the range. So the record low ice that was evident. And if you follow the blue line back through from November through December and January, the ice was at the record low for the last 30 years, but then it kind of broke through that at the beginning of January. It broke through the 11-12 bottom and now has rallied up, higher. So here is, you talk about unintended, what happens when you get these weather patterns and what they do. So perhaps uh, the upside here is the fact that we're going to see, the sea ice is going to at least somewhat repair itself. I'll put the link up for everybody on the chat. So give me 1 second here
and
and we'll do that.
just to answer Bobby Livingsworth, who's asking on the chat, why is only the 2011 2012 year being shown on it? And the reason, Bobby, is that that is the year, the record year of the lowest Arctic Sea extent. And the blue area, the blue line is this year, and you can see, as Joe mentioned, that starting in January, it broke past that, and it's kind of like midway between the all-time low and the normal. And that again is because the all the cold air now has been bottled up right over the Arctic region, and so it's cold up there, and that's why the area of sea ice has increased.
Since we're getting technical, let's see if I can bring up the Madden Julian oscillation. I know we are a family show.
I
um,
remember I remember Madden. He was a great football coach too.
yes, he was, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So okay, without getting too, I just kind of know about the phases. I know what I know in general what drives it. I just got to find the graphic for it. No, that's not the one. Um, there's a NOAA. There's a NOAA link here somewhere.
Why
Ah,
is the MJJO and why do we care?
yeah. All right, so actually, I have it here. I got a chart here. So let's take a look. And I'll put the link up for those of you. This is on CPC's NCEP site, and you can take a look at it. So phases, you see all the numbers there, 1 through 8. So phases 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all warm phases, and 8, 1, 2, and 3 are cold phases for the eastern part of the United States, anyway. And now the map decided to change itself on me. Why did it do that? I don't know. Oh, come on, seriously? Let's see if I can bring it up again. Yeah, there we go. So if you follow the green, it's a little hard for me to see, but if you follow the green, the dates are on there. So the where the dark black dot is the, I believe that's the 10th. That was yesterday. If I can read these numbers right, yeah, that's the 9th. So that's where it's starting from. And if you follow the path of the green line, it starts in phase. Ah, I hit the. There's a thing here that I moved my mouse over. Okay, here we go. The ensemble GFS. So if you follow the green line, that's where the Madden-Julian oscillation phases are supposed to go to. So if you notice, it goes from phase 5, kind of spends a lot of time in the next 10 days or so in phase 6, and then just kind of meanders its way into phase 7, and then it makes the turn, and it looks like it wants to go back into phase 6. So that's off the ensemble. You can look at it from the standpoint of the Hires GFS, which is, you could go for, you could pick your model. You can find the one that suits your needs. Also looks like this one stays in the warm phase all the way through, and there's a few others. You can get a European version of that. But the bottom line is, I mean, this is all about wind patterns that are in the Indian Ocean that come down from the Himalayas and from India, offshore versus onshore. And when they teleconnect all the way across, there seems to be a connection when we've got phases 8, 1, 2, and 3 for the Northeast being a cold phase, meaning cold and snowing in the Northeast. And of course, we haven't seen anything like that throughout much of the winter. And if you look at the Madden-Julian oscillation, it's telling you that there isn't much hope also in the next 16 days. So wherever we look, um, and yeah, Reaver 501. He makes a really great point. I despise these indexes. He says I don't understand them. Honestly, I think that most of the people that quote these indices, the folks that work on them obviously understand them, but the people that quote them, I don't know if they have a real understanding. I know the Madden-Julian oscillation also has an impact on tropical activity in the Indian Ocean and down near Australia. And there's been a lot of tropical activity going on in the last week in Australia. It's their summertime. They're in their for them it's the equivalent to our month of August. So yeah, the Madden-Julian oscillation will be pulled up and quoted simply as a way of supporting whatever your forecast contention is. So you use it in a basic way. You just kind of look for where the phases are. It doesn't help you though with the individual daily forecast. Really, it doesn't. It might give you a good idea of what the general trend is going to be, but you still have to worry about things like where's the rain snow line going to be, how much cold air you're going to have coming down out of Canada, and all those other connections that are vital with regards to snow for the northern mid-Atlantic states and for the urban corridor from Washington to Boston.
And tomorrow we will bring up for all of you what is the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, or PDO,
Yeah,
and how it may have a significant effect overall on long-term climate patterns.
that's
Most
due to
notably,
be that's a 30-year thing, right? Because I think I remember reading something a long time ago. I have to refresh my mind. Something to the effect of that there was a big PDO shift in 2000. I'm sorry, in 1979 or 1980, and that probably means we're due for a shift in the Pacific decadal oscillation. Maybe when this show is over, it'll shift. I don't know.
And
Um,
the last two shifts or reversals corresponded apparently with dramatic shifts in the production of salmon regimes in the North Pacific Ocean, and the climate pattern also affects coastal sea and continental surface air temperatures from Alaska to California. I've always said, Joe, that this is my own. People say who, and they call them deniers, those people who do not believe that man has any say in climate change or global warming. I've always said that maybe it has something to do with the PDO in these flips every 30 or 40 years, that we get these patterns where all of a sudden we go from a warm phase to a cold phase, and that the next flip, whenever it occurs, be it now or maybe in the next 10 years, and it's not an instantaneous thing, that
right,
maybe in 15 or 20 years from now, the northern hemisphere is going to start to begin to cool, because basically it deals with the Pacific Ocean, the temperatures of the Pacific Ocean. And you ask any climatologist worth his salt or her salt, why is it that we have this sudden warming, not sudden, but this gradual warming and cooling of the Pacific Ocean? And the answer back is, well, we don't exactly know.
right. Let me address a couple of points here of the our watchers and our audience they're making. So Paul Roman says, "Is it the exception for the polar vortex not to move down all winter?" Most winters there's more variability. So for it to lock up for an 8 to 10 week stretch is unusual. Just like it's unusual for the pattern to lock up the way it did, say, in the winter of 2013, 2014. Any one of these winters you go back and you look where the primary pattern has stayed pretty much the same throughout the winter months with just these sort of minor interruptions. Those are rare. Most of the time, there is some variation, and then of course you've got the El Nino, which is and the La Nina. How strong or weak they are, that's another really important driver. But it is a little unusual that you're not seeing any kind of variation in the polar vortex. It actually tried to split, and back about a week or two ago, it was showing that vortex moving down into North America and maybe bringing some colder air down for a week or two, and then just like that, it just went right back to where it was. Jason Barry wants us to quote the CRO, which is the Cioffi-Rao oscillation.
How about this? A 65-degree temperature Fahrenheit temperature reported in Antarctica over the weekend, the warmest temperature ever reported on that frozen continent.
On their records. Now, how far do their records go back?
I don't know.
I read somewhere that it only goes back 59 years. I could be wrong. That's what I thought I read. Somebody posted that the records only go back 59 years. So it's,
And it is, after all, summer down there. So
yes, and 59 years is not a big data set. If it was 159 years or 200 years, I'd be a bit more impressed. I'm more impressed about what's going on in Europe because of the super warm temperatures they have. Because there are places where they've been keeping weather records going back, before 1850, and those places have set all-time highs in some areas. I think that certainly speaks to it being more impressive. William Uber, Bill, I just don't see there's nothing on the maps right now that would even remotely suggest that we've got any break in this is weather any break in this weather pattern. So what can you do? And right, there is no rule, Timothy Veltman. You are correct, that says you can't have 5 or more winters in a row like this one in the I-95 corridor. Um,
well, we did have that period in between 96 and 2000 where we lacked any major snowfalls, more than 6 inches at Central Park. We had the blizzard of 96, but then 97, 98, 99 had some snow, but not a whole heck of a lot in any one single sitting. And then that string was broken on the day before New Year's Eve in 2000 with a 10 or 12-inch snowstorm. So, there are periods of a few years where winter
And
doesn't want to settle in.
yeah, and just talking about Europe, we have Stein Tar. I hope Torstad. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Welcome to my my YouTube channel on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And he says we had 18.9 degrees Celsius in Norway this winter. So that's 60s
Right.
up there. That's crazy. That's crazy warm
Yeah.
for up there. I mean, that's really off the charts. It's kind of like you probably could put it on the same level as our December of 2015 when we had temperatures in the 70s up here in the New York City area on Christmas Day.
Right. I walked around in Bermuda shorts on Christmas Eve just to say that I did it.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, yeah, I don't know. It
Joe,
is it is what it is.
maybe we should just cut this right now because all we've had so far since we went on the air 65 minutes ago is 65 consecutive minutes of depressing news for weather enthusiasts and especially those who are yearning for a snowstorm.
Agreed. So we'll put an end to it. Let's uh, let's put it out of its misery tonight. So thanks everybody for being here as always. We appreciate all of you regulars who are here on a nightly basis. It's wonderful to see that even when weather is relatively quiet, that we can have between 100 and 200 people on our live streams. And thank you very much for being here and supporting us. It's very cool. It is very cool. Uh, if you want more weather, make sure you got the Joe Cioffi, the meteorologist Joe Cioffi weather app, which you can download for free on Google Play or on the App Store. And if you want another app, get Angry Ben's weather app. Ben works with me and helps me with one of my websites, nycweathernow.com, and you can download his on Google Play. And I'm hoping that before the winter is done, that we will have the iPhone version of that. Just running into the usual hiccups with Apple, but we're working on it. So keep your fingers crossed that maybe in a month or two, you really weren't going to get too much use of it anyway, the way the winter turned out. So at least you might have it for the hurricane season. You got anything going on?
No, nothing. I went down to CVS today to get my Valentine's, so I'm all set for Friday now.
Well, good for you. Okay. All right, folks. Have a great night. Thanks for being here again, and we'll see you tomorrow, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Good night.
Nighty night.